I hadn't been back in North Carolina in 5 years. The minute my boots hit the dirt driveway of that old barn, something in my chest tightened. The cotton fields swayed under a soft breeze like they were trying to whisper something I wasn't ready to hear. My sister's wedding was the kind of event Hallmark dreams of: vintage string lights, rustic barnwood, lace-draped chairs. But when a family hasn't spoken in years, no amount of fairy lights can hide what's really festering. I kept my distance, sticking to the edges. Mom smiled like she hadn't erased me from every Christmas dinner for the last decade. Aunt Darlene gave a hug that felt like a courtesy. And then there was Savannah, my older sister, the bride. Her smile was too perfect, her eyes calculating. "Glad you could make it," she said like I was a guest from work, not the girl who once shared her bunk bed. "I'm just here to shoot," I muttered, raising the camera. "Wouldn't miss it." I didn't mean the wedding. I meant whatever truth was still buried under years of silence and sugar-coated lies. Funny thing about being the photographer, you see everything, even the stuff no one wants you to. My job was clear: stay behind the lens, don't get involved. But standing there, watching everyone pretend this family was whole, I felt like a ghost with a camera. I moved between tables, clicking away. Kids ran by with frosting on their cheeks. Old couples danced like they'd been waiting years for this moment. And yet, I couldn't shake the ache in my gut. They invited me because they needed someone to document it, not because they missed me. I kept thinking, funny how I'm always behind the camera, never in the picture. That had been the story of my life, documenting everyone else's memories while mine stayed undeveloped. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the peacekeeper. Savannah was the star, the loud laugh, the favorite. I didn't blame her. She just knew how to survive better than I did. I watched her charm people like she was made for it. Me? I was background noise, expected to stay quiet, stay calm, stay out of the way. I raised the camera again, but this time I let it linger. My hands steadied, but my heart didn't. The whispers started around sunset. I caught them in the corners, people pausing mid-sentence when I passed, exchanging glances they thought were discreet. The groom, Colby, avoided my lens like it carried poison. During posed portraits, he looked everywhere but at me. Then there was my cousin, Becca, the maid of honor, leaning in with that honey-sweet venom. Funny how some people only show up when there's a lens involved. I didn't blink, just focused the camera and clicked. But her words landed. They always do, when they come wrapped in fake concern. I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. Colby brushing past one of the bridesmaids, Elena, I think, with a touch that lingered half a second too long. Her eyes darted, her smile faltered, and in that moment, my stomach dropped. Then came the look. Colby and Elena caught each other across the room, and the air snapped. It was like they forgot everyone else existed. No words, just a glance that said everything. I lifted the camera. Click. I see things others miss, I thought. And for once, I wasn't thinking about lighting or framing. Part of me wanted to walk away, pack up my gear and go. But something held me there, something cold and sharp in my chest. Grandma used to say, "Truth doesn't knock, sweetheart. It breaks in." And I could feel it, pressing against the walls of this wedding like a storm about to blow. I stayed. I told myself it was about duty, about finishing the job. But that wasn't it. I needed to know. I started taking more candids, not just the laughing guests and clinking glasses. I captured side glances, quiet exits, hands gripping wine glasses a little too tight. I wasn't just documenting a wedding anymore, I was building a case. It happened during the cake cutting. I was framing the shot. Savannah's hand in Colby's, both smiling wide as they sliced into a 4-tier vanilla monstrosity. I snapped a burst of photos. Routine. Then, while taking a breather behind the barn, I flipped through my roll, checking exposure, contrast, alignment. And there it was. In one photo, barely visible, easily missed, Colby's hand behind Savannah's back, a slip of white paper passing to Elena, her hand catching it under her bouquet. My thumb froze over the screen. Zoom, enhance, confirm. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't innocent. It was practiced, hidden. I stared at that image until the barn lights blurred behind my tears. Not because I was sad, but because the truth had arrived, uninvited, just like me. They've ignored me my whole life, I whispered. They won't ignore what I've captured. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a stage. And the curtain was about to rise. The reception spilled out like a staged play, everyone hitting their marks. The rustic hall next door was glowing under strings of amber lights, beams of wood polished smooth from decades of barn dances. I followed the crowd in, camera in hand, a quiet shadow slipping between clusters of guests. People raised glasses and clinked them together, laughter echoing against the rafters. But the joy felt hollow, like a line rehearsed too many times. No one here was relaxed. Their smiles were pinned on like name tags. I kept to the edges, letting my camera be the barrier between us. Through the lens, their movements slowed, hands gripping wine glasses a little too tightly, eyes darting when they thought no one was looking. Some of them caught my gaze and quickly turned away, whispering to the person beside them. I began shooting with intention, framing each guest like a suspect in a lineup rather than a character in a love story. It was safer than trying to belong. Behind the floral arch at the far end of the hall, a low voice slipped through the white noise of conversation. I adjusted my lens and froze. "You promised," the woman hissed. "She can't find out." "You think I don't know that?" Colby's voice, flat and sharp at once, cut into the music like a blade. I stepped back, every nerve on alert, my breath shallow. The words were quiet, but they landed heavy. The folded note at the cake table hadn't been an accident. This was a secret built on promises and lies. Instead of confronting them, I slid my thumb over the dial and switched to video, holding the camera at hip level. They were so close their shadows merged, his hand hovering just above her elbow like a reflex he couldn't control. The bridesmaid's eyes flicked toward the hall and then back to him. Her lips trembled when she said, "You said you'd handle it." I pressed record. My heart pounded, but my mind stayed cold. "Some truths don't need confrontation," I whispered to myself. "They just need to be shown." In that instant, I wasn't just photographing a wedding anymore. I was documenting an indictment. For a moment, my focus drifted, pulled back to another wedding years ago. A client's ceremony where the groom cried during his vows, his voice cracking in a way that made everyone tear up with him. I'd stood there, behind my camera, and envied the authenticity of it. Nothing in my own family had ever felt that real. Today was the opposite, forced smiles and brittle laughter. My sister's big day wrapped around a rotten core. This isn't about photography anymore, I thought. It's about truth. My finger hovered over the shutter, but I didn't press it. Instead, I let the video roll, capturing their faces when they thought no one else was watching. That memory from the client's wedding hardened into resolve. I stopped framing moments for beauty and started looking for proof. A sudden grip on my arm jolted me back. Aunt Reba, smile painted on like it had been brushed there. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you're digging where you shouldn't." "I'm working," I replied, pulling slightly away. She tilted her head, eyes sharp despite her sugary tone. "You've always been like this, seeing ghosts where there aren't any. It's a wedding, not a crime scene." I kept my voice even. "Funny how people get nervous when you're holding a camera and not a drink." Her smile twitched. "Family harmony is fragile," she murmured. "Don't be the one to break it." And then she floated back into the crowd, leaving the scent of her perfume and something darker behind. It wasn't just Colby and that bridesmaid. It was everyone, eyes sliding away, lips tight, rehearsed cheer. My family had built its reputation on denial, and tonight was no different. Later, I sat at a corner table away from the dance floor, scrolling through my shots. One image snagged me like a hook. Colby's hand pressed to the small of the bridesmaid's back, his thumb moving in a slow, intimate circle. Her smile was fixed, but her body leaned toward him, not away. I paired it in my mind with the note I'd caught earlier and the whisper I'd just recorded. A silent triangle of betrayal. I created a hidden folder on my camera, naming it, "In Case They Deny It." I began printing a few key shots with the small portable printer I always carried. The little photos slid out warm, ink still damp, holding secrets they'd tried to hide. "Let them say I imagined it," I whispered. "The camera doesn't lie." I slipped one of the prints into the fold of my dress, close against my ribs. It felt like a blade I could wield later. For a moment, I thought about leaving, walking out into the night, driving away from the noise and the lies, but something rooted me there. They've erased me for years, I told myself. I won't let them erase the truth. My father's voice came back from a long-ago kitchen table. Sometimes silence is the strongest sound. I stayed, not for revenge, but for clarity, for proof. The music swelled again, glasses clinked harder, and I stood at the edge of it all, the printed photo hidden like a weapon, waiting for the right moment. The reception thinned out just as the last song ended. Guests drifted out under the warm glow of string lights, wine glasses in hand, fake laughter trailing behind them. I stayed back, near the DJ booth, camera slung low, eyes alert. The air indoors shifted, less noise, but not quieter, just heavier. The kind of silence that settles when people have things they don't want overheard. I moved toward the back hall, where caterers had been coming and going. The walls were narrow and unadorned, the light colder. I stopped by a utility table and slipped out a new memory card, checking the previous one as I waited. Photos loaded fast, frames of forced hugs, rehearsed kisses, a groom with eyes always looking past the bride. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned off the screen, slid the card away. A laugh echoed from outside, then the slam of a door. I turned toward the sound, and there she was, Marjorie, alone. She didn't look surprised to see me. That bothered me more than if she had. "I need one more shot," she said. Calm voice, eyes unreadable. "Of what?" I asked. "Aunt Lois and Colton," she said, like it was a casual request. But she watched me too carefully, like she was measuring every blink. I agreed, but not because I believed her. I adjusted the settings, angled myself slightly to the left to frame more than just the two of them. As I raised the camera, I saw it. Lois, sitting stiffly, a phone in her hand tucked beneath her gown. Her fingers clenched around it like it was something stolen. I clicked once. The second shot caught something else. A folded note, perched right on her lap. Her eyes stayed forward, but her jaw flexed. I didn't say a word, just kept clicking until Marjorie nodded. "Thanks," she said, already turning away. Inside, my heart hammered. This is where the real wedding begins, I thought. My mind flicked to Dad. A Saturday afternoon in the garage, sunlight cutting through the slats as he showed me how to shoot shadows. "You show people what they don't see," he'd said, handing me his old Canon. I used to think that was just about photography. But standing there in the half-light of a hallway filled with lies, I understood it differently. I looked back at Marjorie's retreating figure. The smile she threw at someone else felt too wide, too easy. "I won't be silent anymore," I whispered. Not in shadows. Aunt Lois had disappeared from the chair, so I followed, through another hallway, past the kitchen door. I caught her voice before I saw her. Cold. Measured. "She sees it. Manage her quietly." I stopped dead. Her back was to me, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I'm sure. She's not dumb. Handle it." Handle it. She turned then, eyes narrowed. "You weren't meant to hear that." "No," I said, stepping into view. "But I did." Her face didn't twitch. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed." I stared at her. "I don't plan to close it, I plan to show it." She took a step toward me, but I was already walking away. Back inside the main hall, I made a loop near the lighting setup and pretended to adjust a fixture. My hands weren't shaking now. I reviewed the images again. Lois's hand, the phone, the note. I layered them, next to the earlier shots, the whisper clip, the familiar brush of a hand that didn't belong there. I created a mini slideshow on my screen. Quick, discreet, then backed it up onto the USB. I changed my camera to autoburst, fast captures, no blur, no missed frames. I glanced around the room, looking for someone I trusted. Just one person, someone who still believed truth was worth something. Then I saw it. Colton, leaning in close to Marjorie, whispering something only she could hear. Her face flickered, pain, confusion, then blankness. She nodded slightly. My finger hovered just above the shutter. This, I thought, is what she didn't expect me to see. When the last guests finally filtered out, the hall felt emptier than I expected. Silence stretched, echoing off polished floors. I slipped through the crowd toward the corridors, camera dangling by my side, every sense sharpened. In the mirror I passed, I saw my own reflection, steady, determined, restless. A muffled argument drifted from behind a half-open door. I crouched, listening. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. I reminded myself, I am allowed to see what they tried to hide. Behind that door, voices rose. I pressed a button on the camera, recording low. I paid extra to control the guest list. You know how Dad used numbers, Lois hissed. Marjorie's retort followed. Don't forget who's sensitive here. She'll blow this up. Their fight wasn't about romance. It was about power and image. I held my breath, their words carved into the stillness. I shifted closer, camera poised, catching the tension between we must protect and she must be silenced. After the argument, the door cracked further. I slipped inside. On a side table lay a sealed envelope. Delara, not to be shown today. My heart thundered. I tucked it into my coat pocket, sliding it away as if hiding evidence. My legs felt weak. This was bigger than a wedding. As I backed out, Aunt Reba appeared in the hallway mirror. She blocked my path, her voice soft but firm. You shouldn't wander these halls. Some rooms people go in, but never leave the same. I met her gaze. Some doors must be opened for truth to breathe, I said quietly. Her eyes flickered. Fear, regret, threat. She stepped aside, but her hand trembled slightly, and a dark stain on her sleeve caught my eye. Now the night felt full of secrets. Inside a quiet utility room, I flipped the audio recording. A shiver ran through me when I heard, "Switch off her flash. Don't let her expose us." Words meant for me. I opened the envelope. The contract inside bore my name, my share of the studio, sold without my knowledge. Betrayal went deeper than I feared. Marjorie and Lois weren't reacting. They had rehearsed this script long ago. I tucked the document close. I lined up photos I'd sneaked earlier. I set them aside as proof, evidence I would not let vanish. I was packing my bag, camera, documents, all concealed, and then a knock. The door rattled softly. I froze. "Who's there?" I whispered. The hallway light snapped on. I woke before the sun had fully risen. Light filtered through lace curtains, throwing soft shapes on the wall. The air in the bridal suite still carried the faint scent of perfume and wine, but the laughter from the night before had long evaporated. I sat quietly with a cup of bitter coffee, staring at the envelope I'd taken. Inside, the same contract. My name printed, my portion of the studio sold, my signature forged, and at the bottom, a clause tucked in small print. Effective without notice. I closed my eyes. I remembered something my dad once told me. Silence isn't absence, it's absence denied. They didn't just cut me out, they tried to erase me while smiling for pictures. I took a slow breath, folded the papers back up, and slid them into my camera bag. There wasn't space left for shock, only for resolve. I checked my equipment, packed backups, set my files to auto-upload. Downstairs, the quiet of morning carried weight. Guests began drifting in for brunch. Cousins with stiff smiles, uncles with polite nods. And then Lois, arms open, voice loud, hugged Marjorie like they hadn't just plotted betrayal in a back room. Colton kept his distance, head low. Aunt Reba, too cheerful, too close. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I lined them up for group photos, checking light and spacing, my mind sharper than my lens. I angled my shot to catch a sliver of the envelope sticking out of Marjorie's purse. Not obvious, but enough for anyone really looking. They thought I was still just clicking buttons. Then came the toast. Marjorie raised a glass, thanking everyone who helped make today perfect. Everyone. Except me. Lois cleared her throat. Don't forget who captured these moments, dear. The room went still for a second. Marjorie's smile flickered like a bulb about to burn out. I didn't react. Not on the outside. But inside, I felt something shift. I raised the camera and caught their faces, Marjorie straining to recover. Lois, her expression softening just enough to wonder if that slip was mercy or strategy. Later, I ducked into the lighting room to check the slideshow setup. The door wasn't locked. Inside, Marjorie and Lois were mid-fight. "You're ruining this day. Just drop it," Marjorie said, voice clipped. "She saw the papers. It's too late," Lois whispered. I eased the door slightly, hit record on the mic in my hand. "We'll deny it all," Lois continued. "Photos can be edited. Contracts can be misread." Marjorie snapped, "Do you really want her going public with this?" They went quiet. I backed away slowly. I knew what I had to do. I returned to the main hall and placed the printed contract, select candid shots, and my USB backup into my camera bag. I texted a single guest I trusted, one who still believed in facts. Asked to see the slideshow, start with the family portraits. Then I walked toward the projection booth, heart calm, breath steady. "They think they control the story," I muttered. "I'll let the images tell the truth." I opened the booth door, stepped in, and reached for the settings. Click. I froze. The projector switched on. A beam of light shot across the room. The first slide, already up. "No," I whispered. "That wasn't supposed to show yet." But it was there. And now, too late to stop it. Morning came slow, as though the house itself was withholding the sun. In the bridal suite, I sat at a corner table pacing the slideshow order, clutching the USB, the envelope hidden beneath layers of camera gear. My heart thumped. I thought of Maya Angelou's words, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Enough silence. I arranged backup cameras in corners, tested audio levels, loaded extra batteries. Downstairs, I could hear the first stirrings of brunch, laughter, silverware, soft conversations. The day had shifted. I vowed, today the spotlight wouldn't shelter them any longer. I slipped into the projection room when the slideshow began. The first image, family portraits, drew applause. I stood behind the camera, watching. Then the second slide flickered, the shot of Colby passing the folded note. Gasps broke the hum. Lois reddened. Marjorie stiffened. Faces turned. I stayed hidden, but alert. "They'll deny it," I told myself. And yet, the image was real. Aunt Reba looked torn, confusion in her eyes. Marjorie stepped up, voice controlled. "That must be a misalignment in editing." Murmurs rose. She motioned to go back a slide, attempting control. Colton gently nodded, backing her shift. Lois leaned close, whispering, "Damage control now." That's when I understood. She'd come prepared, but misjudged me. I steadied myself and readied the next slide. The photo of Lois's hand on the phone, the contract, the note. I braced, waiting for the backlash. In midstream, I projected the envelope's contents. The contract's clauses spelled betrayal. My stake transferred without consent. The room stilled. Marjorie's protest came. "You're violating privacy." My answer? "This is family truth." My voice stayed calm, firm. I walked into the light, linking the slide images. Note, whisper, contract. I saw tears in Lois's eyes. Guilt, pain, regret, all in one. I held my ground. Marjorie pulled out a phone and played a manipulated video, one that painted me as the disruptive party. The crowd gasped, whispers spread. Some nodded at her version. Lois lunged for the phone, shouting, "Stop this madness!" My chest tightened. I didn't lash out. I held steady. Without faltering, I played the original clip from my USB next to hers. The contrast was undeniable. Truth and lie, side by side, exposed. The room split. Some stood with me, others with Marjorie. A hand reached for the projector switch. I lunged to block it. The light wavered, then died. In the sudden dark, every soul in the room held its breath. I woke up in the bridal suite before anyone knocked, before the kitchen clattered, before voices stirred in the hallways. There was a stillness, a kind of hush that felt rehearsed. The sunlight slid through the blinds in sharp angles, slicing through silence. I pulled out the prints, reviewed the footage, the slideshow reactions, the scans of that contract. Everything I had laid bare now lived in memory cards and paper. Dad once told me, "Courage is seeing the unseen." I didn't get it then. I do now. I placed 2 backup cameras in places no one would think to look. I dressed without makeup, no pretense, just my skin and my story. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, I've waited too long to be seen. Outside, brunch was set in the garden. Folding chairs under old oaks, white cloth flapping in the light breeze. Fruit bowls, quiche, sparkling cider. Guests were settling in, small talk, laughter that sounded thinner today. I walked among them like any photographer, camera hanging casual, eyes scanning. Colton sat with Aunt Reba, voice hushed, his shoulders curled inward like he wished he could disappear. Lois and Marjorie came late. Their smiles were stiff, rehearsed. Marjorie kissed air beside cheeks. Lois's glance barely met mine, but I watched everything. The glances, the way Marjorie clutched her purse tighter when near me. I stored it all, knowing the reckoning was coming. Jolene stood up, a woman who'd known our family since before I had a voice in it. She raised her glass. This family built an image for decades, she said, voice steady. But every image has its missing frame. The quiet cracked open. A few heads turned toward me. My camera, my lens. I wonder, Jolene continued, who decided you belonged behind the lens and not in the picture? Gasps. Marjorie's face flushed, but she stayed seated. My stomach clenched, not from fear, but from recognition. Somebody saw me. Not as a function, not as a tool, as a person. The room shifted. A nerve had been struck. Lois stood abruptly and whispered something to Marjorie, then walked away. I followed. She didn't go far, just inside the side hall, where chairs were stacked and the air was cool. She didn't speak right away, just turned and let out a sob like it had waited years to break free. I'm sorry, she said. I thought keeping the peace would protect you both. She confessed it, signing over my part of the studio, telling Marjorie it was just business, hiding it because she couldn't watch me struggle. I felt everything all at once. Rage, sadness, that strange ache when someone confesses too late. I didn't want to erase you, she whispered. But she had. I didn't tell her I forgave her. I didn't know yet if I could. I walked back out while people were still seated. My steps were measured. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like wire. I'm not here for applause, I said. I'm here for accountability. I showed them the contract, the photos, the video clips. This wasn't just about the slideshow. This was about years, erasure, inheritance, truth. Marjorie tried to interrupt. That's enough. No, I said. You don't get to decide when it's enough. I showed the footage side by side, my lens versus hers, the manipulation against the raw image. The weight of it shifted something in the space. People didn't clap. They didn't need to. They listened. Then the lights snapped off. Someone had flipped the garden switch. In the sudden dark, someone shouted my name. Delara! Torches flickered back on. Marjorie was standing, her face pale, her hands shaking. I tightened my grip on the camera. The ballroom had gone so still I could hear the projector's low hum. Guests leaned on the edges of their seats as if air itself had thickened. My hands were damp on the USB, camera strap biting into my shoulder. Marjorie stood across the room, chin high but lips trembling. Lois avoided my eyes, Colton's jaw set tight. This was it. My father's voice rose in my mind. The darkest secrets fear the light. I drew in a breath, let it out slow. My finger hovered over the clicker. This is my moment, I told myself. No more hiding. The first images rolled out onto the screen. Safe portraits, curated smiles. People relaxed, murmuring compliments. Then the shift. Candid shots of exchanged notes, phones hidden behind flowers, whispers frozen midword, gasps scattered through the crowd, murmurs rose, a wave of disbelief. I narrated in a low, even tone. Here's what you tried to bury. Slide by slide, I let the truth crawl out of the frames. Lois's eyes welled. Marjorie's composure cracked. The whisper clip played next, faint but undeniable. The staged wedding dissolved into a collage of secrets. Heads turned toward Marjorie. Guests leaned forward, not away. Marjorie surged toward the projector, her heels clicking like gunfire. "This is staged," she snapped. "She's editing everything. This is manipulation." Colton stepped in, voice sharp. "None of this is real." Marjorie waved the fake video she'd used earlier, trying to drown me with her version. Hands grappled for the remote. "Turn it off!" she barked. The crowd rose halfway from their chairs. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" But no one moved to stop me. I clutched the remote against my chest, steady as stone. "You don't get to erase me," I said quietly, but the room heard it anyway. Then I played the final slide. The contract filled the screen, signatures, dates, clauses, proof, my name erased from my father's legacy years before. "You rewrote my role," I said. "But I'm rewriting it now, in plain light." The projector's glow washed over their faces. Lois gasped. Marjorie's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room divided, some clapping softly, others frozen, hands over lips. I stepped back from the lens, letting the images speak louder than I ever could. Marjorie's body sagged as if something inside her had collapsed. "You always wanted to be seen," she hissed. "You'll regret this." My answer came calm, almost gentle. "I'd regret staying silent more." Lois began to weep openly, words of apology tumbling but broken. Colton just stared at the floor, as though it might open and swallow him. Guests whispered, "What kind of family is this?" The power dynamic shifted under my feet, no longer their stage, no longer their story. I gathered my camera bag slowly. People parted as I walked. Behind me, a sound, a gasp. Marjorie crumpled at the podium, one hand clutching the edge. I stopped, turned my head just enough to speak without looking back. "Don't try to stop me." My voice didn't tremble. The crowd moved aside, and I kept walking, the strap digging into my shoulder like a badge. I woke up in a different bed, in a town that didn't know my name. The little Airbnb was quiet, peaceful really. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like something pressing against my chest. My camera rested on the nightstand beside me, its lens cap on like a final period at the end of a sentence. I sat up slowly, wrapped in that heavy kind of exhaustion that comes after telling the truth. The kind that doesn't knock you out. It clears space. The sun was rising just outside the small window, golden and soft. I made a cup of coffee and watched the light shift on the wall. Images from last night flickered in my head. Faces frozen in shock, secrets spilling, the weight of walking out. I held the warm mug, breathed in, whispered aloud to no one but myself. I did what I had to. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. Messages, missed calls, emails, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Teresa, my cousin, left a voicemail. "You didn't burn the house down, Delara," she said. "You just showed us it was already on fire." I sat with that for a while. On Facebook, someone had posted a photo of me as a kid, missing front teeth, holding a tiny camera. The caption read, "Truthful even back then." It made me laugh, then cry, then laugh again. Meanwhile, Colton had posted something vague and hollow. "Sometimes families go through things. Not everything you hear is true." Classic deflection. No surprise. But from Lois? Nothing. No message. No missed call. Her silence felt louder than anyone's words. Late afternoon, a knock on the door. A courier handed me an envelope, handwritten name across the front. Lois. I stood at the counter a minute before opening it. The letter was short, but raw. "I thought silence was protection," she wrote, but it became permission. She admitted more than I expected. How much she knew, how long she stayed quiet, how she told herself it was for my own good. She didn't beg for forgiveness, just hoped for peace. I read it twice, then folded it gently and tucked it into the back of my journal. Maybe not closure, but something near it. The next day, I drove, no destination, just the wheel in my hand and the road unrolling ahead. Somewhere, instinct took me to that overlook, where Marjorie and I once camped as teens, back when everything still felt possible. I parked, sat on the hood, pulled out a copy of the wedding contract. No need to read it again. I dug a small hole in the dirt and buried it there. Let the earth take it. Some truths don't need to live with us forever, I whispered. Just be acknowledged. Back in the car, I deleted the final folder from my camera. That act wasn't for them. It was for me. A line drawn, a new lens. I thought about going back to freelance work, maybe teaching, maybe both. Stories still mattered. But now, I'd choose which ones to tell, and how, and when. Weeks passed. Then I found myself in a community center, surrounded by people older than me, but still curious about light, angles, and memory. I started mentoring seniors who wanted to learn photography. Ruth, one of the regulars, once told me, "Photos don't lie, but they sure wait for us to tell the story right." I kept that with me. I took portraits again, simple, candid, free. I never told them what happened, unless someone asked. Even then, I let the details come out like I do with a slow exposure. Only what's necessary, no more. I started writing too. A book. I called it Framed by Bloodlines. Writing it felt less like a task, more like breathing, and I learned something vital through it. Surviving family doesn't mean saving it. One evening, just before sunset, I walked the beach with my camera in hand. The tide was low, gulls cutting across the sky. The wind picked up strands of my hair and carried them toward the sea. I lifted my lens, aimed not at the past, but toward what was ahead. And in that quiet moment, I thought, you don't move on by forgetting. You move on by choosing what deserves to come with you.